A conversation with Wayne County's new leader. DPS gets a new emergency manager. The governor preps for his state of the state. And the auto show roars into town. Stay put. My Week starts right now.
Recently, Michigan's economy has begun to turn around. Michigan's gained over 250,000 new jobs. We've paid off $20 billion in long-term debt. And our population is increasing for the first time in a decade. But to make Michigan a top 10 state, there's still plenty of work to be done. Step up and help put Michigan on top. Learn what you can do at MichiganTurnaroundPlan.com.
Funding is also provided by Delta.
Hi there and welcome to My Week. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Christy McDonald. Change is certainly the buzzword in 2015 in Detroit and around the state. And perhaps one of the biggest changes is in Wayne County, where Warren Evans has taken over the reins of leadership. County Executive Evans is here. He's ready to take our questions about the county's finances and the future. Plus, the Detroit Public School District gets its fourth emergency manager. Can the school system's financial problems ever get fixed? Also, what will the governor talk about in his State of the State address next week? And the North American International Auto Show is revved up and ready for the crowds. That is all coming up for you on My Week. But we do start in Wayne County. He's been the county sheriff and the Detroit police chief. Now Warren Evans is taking on a new challenge, Wayne County executive. Evans has already cut salaries, reduced staff in an effort to fix the county's finances, but what else does he have planned? Joining us now is Wayne County Executive Warren Evans. Welcome. And of course, we have our My Week contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. Gentlemen, it's good to see you and welcome to My Week, Warren.
Good morning and thank you.
All right, so let's start about the things that you know about already, the accumulated deficit, the pension fund problems, the jail project. What I want to ask you first, though, is what surprises have you found in this first 2 weeks on the job?
Probably none. My anticipation was that things were worse than had been pronounced earlier, and I think we're finding that to be true. We're still trying to get to the very bottom of the hole just to know where we are. I think it's fundamentally important both for Wayne County to change and for us to be transparent, that we've got to be real clear about how deep the hole is when we get to the bottom of it. And we've got to let all the stakeholders see that. And going forward, I think the goal has got to be agree how deep the hole is, and then we can discuss, argue, do whatever we need to do to try to find the solutions. But I think to be arguing about the depth of the hole is kind of silly at this point. We've got to be clear about that.
So when do you think that you're going to find out how deep the hole is in terms of timing, and who do you have to agree with on that?
Well, I think in about 10 days I should have everything I need to know. Bob Dada is doing a tremendous job of helping us determine how deep the hole, but also to help do the design work for our attempts to get out of it. None of them are going to be pretty. But obviously you need a really skilled person to be able to, based on this set of facts, here are the possibilities, now let's work through them. And I think the transition team, Data and others, have been very comfortable with the fact that I've not asked them to take anything off the table. There are no hidden issues, well, we can't go there. No, it's wide open. You tell me how bad it is, we'll look at the options, and then we'll do what we have to do.
Can you get out of this hole without the state's help? I know we're all familiar with what the process Detroit went through, first emergency management, then bankruptcy. Is that the path Wayne County is on?
I don't think so. We'll never get out of it without the state's help.
But what form?
Well, it may not even be a consent agreement. The help may be technical. The help may be, in many respects, watching our path and saying, if you stay on that path, we'll probably be all right with you guys. So that's still to be determined, but I don't see necessarily at this point that we're looking at imminent bankruptcy. We certainly have a solvency issue, there's no question about it, cash flow problems. But I'm still optimistic that we might be able to do it, but we'll never be able to do it all by ourselves. It's got to be a team issue. The state's been very, very helpful. I've run a number of names of appointees up that ladder just to get feedback. It's been great that in many of those instances, they had the same good feelings about people that I had. That always works in relationships and negotiations, and obviously want very, very qualified people to try to get us out of this mess. And it is a mess. I mean, there's no minimizing. I know enough now to know that the hole's deep enough to be scary. I just don't know where the bottom is.
You know, the one side of the equation that we don't talk much about is the revenue side, and the inability of county governments to really raise more revenue than they have. You know, the state over the last 10 or 15 years has really changed the way that state government can get money from citizens for government. Counties have not been dealt in on those changes. Is that something that you feel like the governor ought to be looking at?
Absolutely, but I mean, I think there has to be a return for the state too. And I think what historically happens is we ask, the big we, ask for things without finding ways to streamline our process and give value to the ask.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to do. We don't know exactly where we're going to wind up, but we do know that revenue sharing is going to be a problem, and there may be a better formula for revenue sharing statewide. I'm not talking about because it's good for Wayne County. I mean, you've got to find some win-wins that say this is good for others too, and this may not hurt the state, and we may be able to do this. If it's revenue sharing, if it's our property taxes. I mean, obviously, if property taxes double in Wayne County next year, we don't get the double. You know, we get the head lead portion of that.
Right.
So it would take us 15 or 20 years to get back to where we were before, and I think that's worth discussion.
Well, Warren, I want to go back just a minute. You talked about having a solvency issue and a cash flow issue. Are you anywhere near not being able to pay your bills or make payroll?
No, we're not. But next year and the year after, when the hole gets deeper because we've borrowed against the future for so long, the structural deficit next year and the year after is going to be really significant. And I can't guarantee that there won't be problems then if we don't create a preemptive strike now.
I want to ask real quick, when you talk about financing counties, do you look to your neighbors on the other side and you say, well, look at Oakland County and say that they've had some success. Do you take a page from Brooks Patterson's playbook at all?
I think we take a page from everybody's playbook that makes sense, and I think my relationships over the last 15 years help us in that direction. My relationship with Mike Duggan, my relationship with Mark Hackle, and my relationship with L. Brooks Patterson have been good for many, many years. I mean, this is my third elective office countywide, and I've had relationships with them. I've taken what makes sense, and quite often, many of them have taken from me, you know, in previous life. So I think they all have expertise. I think they're all there for a reason. I think they've all done some very, very good things, and I think there are things I can learn from all of them, and hopefully at some point there'll be some things they can learn from me, but that'll wait to be seen.
Have they given you some unsolicited advice?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no way in the world L. Brooks Patterson's not going to give you unsolicited advice. I don't mean that jokingly. But solicited or unsolicited, I actually go and ask. You know, I have ideas about the way I think things should work, but I have sense enough to know that there are other viewpoints and vantage points that aren't necessarily mine that would be helpful in that decision making, and I'm trying my best to do that.
How much of the county's problems are driven by the pension liabilities, the long-term sort of unqualified, really, liabilities?
And unfunded liabilities.
And unfunded.
A lot of it.
And so what do you do about that? I mean,
well, that's part of the restructuring plan, if you will, once we know how deep the hole is. I mean, obviously there's not just one hole when you look at it that way. This is the pension side and the general fund side and others, but I still have to get kind of a cumulative understanding of what the depths are everywhere for us to try to figure out how to do that. We lost the county lost a pension case just recently to the tune of another $32 million. It's getting tacked on there somewhere.
And your hole in terms of underfunding seems to be larger than Detroit's was when it got in trouble. And I don't think there's going to be a grand bargain for Wayne County. Probably there's not going to be foundation help and state help in terms of a cash bailout. How, other than bankruptcy, do you restructure pension liabilities?
Well, I mean, there's refinancing possibilities. There are possibilities of, you know, we still have some millage ability. As much as you hate to talk about it, everything's got to be on the table.
Well, can you do anything with your unions to renegotiate that debt, or is that off the table too?
I don't think anything's off the table. I think we have a credibility problem with our unions from the previous administration, quite frankly. And what I've tried to demonstrate early on in this administration is nobody goes bloodless. We're all going to bleed. There's going to be some bleeding here. You know, I brought in a new team of people and automatically paid them 5% less than the people that they replaced. Is that going to get us out of the deficit? We all know it isn't. But I think it sends a message that says, you know, we're willing to start at the top with trying to come up with creative ways to do this. We're going to have to get to a number at some point, but how we get to that number, how onerous it is on county employees, how onerous it is on taxpayers is still worth discussion. And you know, we want to make it as equitable as we can, but I think it's got to be real clear that we've got to do it. There's no kicking the can down the road any farther. And so.
And I think it's got to be difficult, too, once you get to the bottom of that hole, when you have to start prioritizing what is going to be cut and how, because you have a sheriff and you have a county prosecutor that could always use more money in their budgets.
And they're going to need that, but that doesn't mean that has to be general fund dollars, and it doesn't mean it has to be structured automatically. And so I think there's grant funding. I mean, one thing the county has never done because of the fiefdoms and the territorial nature is other electeds getting together and applying for grants together. I mean, when you apply for them together, the idea of the person funding the grant is, well, everybody must be on board. And if everybody's on board, there's more of a likelihood that this will work than it would have before. I'm prepared to team with those who are going to manage the provision of services in a better way, and the prosecutor is clearly one of those people. I think we bring in revenue from grants, and quite frankly, the county, and we're in the process of reprioritizing what we can do with our general fund dollars. There may be some services we provide that we're going to have to pull back on. And that money is going to have to be allocated to those departments that are the most critical. I mean, I don't have that finished at this point, but I really mean it when I say everything is on the table. We need all the help we can get, but we're going to do it intelligently ourselves.
Can you do this if Kim Worthy and Benny Napoleon continue to spend without regard to your budget and your spending plan?
But that's you saying that, Nolan. I'm not so sure that that's true in terms of just willy-nilly spending. There is some, and
well, they haven't lived within the budgets they've been given by the county.
But having been a county sheriff who lived through a bunch of budgets, I understand if the budget is nowhere based in reality, then you can't live within the budget.
So that's your commitment to them, to give them a realistic budget?
A realistic budget, and try to provide the resources for that budget, and understanding if they don't live within that budget, I understand how constructive coercion works, and we have to work at holding that together. I mean, that's just simply it. Now, I'm not saying that's the issue with either of those electeds at this point, but obviously, if I give you the resources to get the job done, I have a responsibility to make sure those resources are being used appropriately so the county gets the services that it needs.
What about the jail? Speaking of public safety, I mean, that's still sitting there, partially built with a big dollar sign price tag on it, but we don't have a solution yet.
Yeah, we don't. And the more we seek a solution, I have retired Chief Judge Rick Kaufman in charge of the jail project, and he has been working on it for months. It is, at least in my opinion, probably the worst decision that I know Wayne County has made in the 35 or 40 years that I've been associated
Which decision?
with.
To build the jail where it was?
The decision to build it without adequate information to determine what the cost would be long term, what the operating expenses would be for the facility. I mean, we still didn't know that in the middle of this. How do you begin to build something, sell bonds, borrow money, and you don't know what the savings is going to be at the end, or if there's a savings at the end?
Right.
And those arguments are still going on now. What I do know is I don't have any offers for that piece of property that come anywhere close to the $130 million that's sunk in it.
Yeah, right.
And so rehabbing the old jails will be tremendous because they've been neglected in terms of maintenance for so long. So there's just no easy answer. But what I don't want to happen is that we wind up with less jail beds than we had before after we expend more money and hurt the criminal justice system in Wayne County, which already needs help. Right. And so it's a tremendous problem, but I am confident that the team we have will fix it if anybody can.
All right, well, we look forward to hearing what's going to happen the next couple of days and talking about getting to the bottom of that hole, and we look forward to talking with you as the time goes on.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a busy first of the year for Governor Snyder. Just this week, he signed at least 20 bills as he works his way through legislation that landed on his desk at the end of last year's session. Included in that pile is the road funding bill that goes before voters in May, seeking a 1-cent increase in the sales tax. The governor also appointed a new emergency manager for Detroit Public Schools. Darnell Early is Flint's current EM, and he will now lead the district. And the governor is busy preparing for his State of the State address next Tuesday. It's all a lot to take on, but the governor appears to be up to the task, even with the torn Achilles tendon. And I gotta say, guys, when you see the governor hobbling, he's usually a guy who moves very fast from one place to another. It's hasn't seemed to slow him down a little bit. You do feel bad for him.
Well, you don't want to take up jogging that late in life, I don't think. I'm not taking any of those kind of risks.
Middle-aged athleticism is always a bad idea.
Well, all right. Well, we wish him well and that he recovers quickly on that. But let's talk about all of the various things he has on his plate right now. What are we seeing in terms of what kind of campaign the administration is working on and getting that sales tax raise for the roads?
Well, that's, I think, what we're going to see Tuesday night, get our first hint, because they've got a big selling job. And if the governor thinks he can push this through simply by appealing to motorists that their roads are bad and it's costing them money to fix the cars, that didn't work last year. And when he tried to rally support and pressure on the legislature, it didn't work. He's going to have to come up with some answers to the questions the voters have. People want to know why their roads don't last as long as they think they should when they're fixed. They want to know what's happening to all of the money they already pay for roads. He's got to answer some concerns folks have about the way the money's being used, and well beyond, oh, the roads are bad for your cars. We know that, and it still hasn't moved people on this issue.
What do you think that should include?
I'm not sure I agree with that. It hasn't moved the legislature, which
responds to public pressure.
But which is horribly gerrymandered in a way that protects extremism. All of the polls of people in Michigan show that they wanted a solution for this and that they were willing to pay for that solution in the form of either fees or taxes. I don't know that this is going to be that hard of a selling job. I think the questions you're asking, he should answer, and he probably will. And there are people who want those answers, and they deserve them. I mean, we really do need to figure out why it is we spend so much on roads as it is and don't get the results.
Steve, I'm telling you, people do want a solution. But I don't see any evidence yet that they're willing to pay for a solution. The letters we receive, when I go out and speak, and I'll ask groups, how many of you think we need to do something about our roads? Every hand goes up. Yeah. When you say, how many would support a higher sales tax?
Yeah, no, I see some of that too.
A sales tax is one of the hardest taxes to pass. Yeah. And we're not giving, last time we raised it was for Prop A. We gave people property tax relief in exchange for it. We're giving them nothing in exchange.
Well, and the other weirdness here that I think will be hard to sell is this idea of going to the voters for a penny on the sales tax, which is a complete waste of constitutional effort. I mean, we only get to revisit that question every couple of decades.
So you think that we should have taken a little loop?
They should have gone for two.
Well, you'd have never got
and sent the other penny to education or higher ed or something else. That would have gotten another constituency behind this too.
All right, two other things I want to talk about real quick before we leave this subject, and I'm sure the governor's going to be talking a lot about education next Tuesday at the State of the State. Also, a new emergency manager for Detroit Public Schools. A lot of people were upset that another emergency manager has been appointed, and saying the fact that this kind of management system is not working for the district.
And I think the governor acknowledges that. I mean, when he came in to talk to us, he said this hasn't worked as well as it should have, as well as we thought it would, but at this point, they can't think of anything else to do. So they were on a time constraint. The worst thing that would have happened is that today, and today was a deadline, that the school board took back over. He's not going to let that happen. But he can't let this new emergency manager, can't let Darnell Early sit there for 18 months doing the same thing the previous three managers did. He's got to use this time he has to rather quickly come up with a long-term solution for the Detroit schools. And he says this community group, this 31-member committee, he's going to listen to their advice. But you can't keep them an emergency manager forever. You can't give them back to the school board. There's got to be another answer.
Well, and there's got to be money on the table. I mean, one of the things that the emergency manager law doesn't address is the revenue problem that the district continues to have as kids get siphoned off either into charter schools or as people leave the city and go to the suburbs. there is not enough money to operate that system as it's configured right now, and there's not an easy way to close more schools because of the geographic distribution of population loss. So you've got to talk about another way to fund a public school system that people can rely on in the city of Detroit. And the governor's not really leading on it.
No, and I don't think that's going to happen. But I think what you said was key in terms of as configured now. I think you're going to see a whole different configuration of that district. I'm not sure a system of schools in Detroit still is viable, still makes sense, given the finances and the number of kids you're talking about.
One thing we're also going to have to watch out of Lansing in the next couple of days is the House Fiscal Agency reporting that there's a $454 million shortfall for 2015, and that's going to be a big deal in terms of budgetary. So we're going to have to watch that. And be sure to tune in next Tuesday night for a special edition of My Week. We will be live with analysis and guest viewpoints on the governor's State of the State and President Obama's State of the Union address. It's all the same night. It starts at 7 p.m. on January 20th. Turning now to Detroit, the city is in the global spotlight again. This time it's shining on the 2015 North American International Auto Show at Cobo Center. Horsepower, luxury, fuel efficiency, and the future, all on display this week at the North American International Auto Show. The show opens to the public on Saturday, but journalists from around the world spent the week taking in the latest designs and reveals from auto companies, as well as handing out awards for the best car and truck of the year, going to Ford's F-150 pickup and the VW Golf. The enthusiasm of gearheads at Cobo comes after a year of serious recalls involving ignition switches for General Motors and the continual struggle for automakers to tout smaller, more fuel-efficient vehicles to car buyers who still lean toward the bigger trucks and SUVs, especially with gas prices so low.
It's been a very big year for the Buick brand. Our sales have increased about 11% in 2014, and so coming into 2015 we had a tremendous amount of momentum.
The next generation Volt is going to have 50 miles of EV range, and then it's got its gas-powered electric generator that will take you to a total of 400 miles, even more, between fill-ups or charging.
But the display hasn't disappointed, with new colors, some muscle, and inventive concepts.
Whether you're buying a battery electric vehicle, a plug-in hybrid, or a performance car, that same capability, that same know-how, the same light weighting, all those sorts of technologies allow us to do everything we're doing going forward.
The show is also bigger than cars. It's a way for Michigan to tout manufacturing, plus showcase downtown Detroit, newly emerged from bankruptcy. All right, so there's a new outlook for the city and a new look for Cobo Center. That should result in a lot of upbeat stories from the foreign press, right, guys? I mean, Nolan, you've been down at the show all week long.
All week, I tell you, it's the best show I've seen in years.
Really? How so?
In terms of the displays, Cobo looks great. What they've done with Cobo, I mean, it looks almost as if they've doubled the size of the floor. Of course, they didn't, but the way they've added space, it's just, it's just a big soaring show throughout. It looks a lot bigger, a lot more impressive than it did just 2 or 3 years ago. The displays have all been freshened, updated. A lot of money put into the displays. You can tell the industry's got a little cash to work with, and the vehicles are amazing. This is truly a terrific show this week.
All right, so we were looking at some of the video, and you guys were doing a little oohs and ahs over that as well. You see anything you like, Stephen?
Well, I think that Ford GT looks very interesting.
You look good in it, Stephen.
I'm always puzzled by this race for horsepower. 650 horsepower in a car, a stock car, a racing car only has
wrong with horsepower, Stephen.
So what do you need that on the streets for?
That is the girliest thing I've ever heard you say.
What are you going to drive?
No, don't use that as a derogatory comment,
That's
please.
right.
Thank you very much.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with horsepower, number 2. But I always think it's interesting too. But you still see people going for big trucks when we are talking about fuel economy and the standards, the government standards that are going to be coming out that the automakers have to reach. But still, I mean, I drive a Chevy Tahoe, and you still see people going for big trucks.
The trucks are really fuel efficient. I mean, 4 trucks.
Well,
they are more fuel efficient now than they've ever been. They're making a lot of these trucks out of aluminum now, or they're talking about that. That's going to make them even more efficient. I think that it's about this sort of bigness and the horsepower, but it's not the same kind of gas guzzling. They're also putting 6 cylinders in some of these trucks instead of 8 cylinders.
And the technology is pushing them to more fuel efficiency, but there's only so far they can go and still produce the kind of cars folks buy. Most of what's selling today, SUVs, trucks, sedans, aren't moving all that well. Gas is $2 a gallon or less. People aren't going to consider fuel economy as much when they're shopping. There's a review of these really strict CAFE mandates coming up in 2017. I talked to Bill Ford on the floor this week, and he said what they're going to be looking for is the government to be very realistic about technology, whether they can build cars that people actually will buy, looking at fuel prices, and consumer preferences.
Last 30 seconds, Stephen. What is the big takeaway? I always feel like, Detroit is on display again for the world. And how do you think that we've done so far?
Except for the weather. It looks
January
great.
in Michigan, it's not going to change.
Let's move the show to June. I think the city looks good. The Cobo looks great. The show is big. I think this is a plus for us in a bigger way than it has been even in recent years.
All right, well, I know I'll see you guys at the charity preview on Friday night. And that is going to do it for My Week. Thanks so much for joining us. Make sure you find us at myweek.org and on Facebook and on Twitter. I'm Christy McDonald. For all of us at Detroit Public TV, we will see you next week for My Week. Take care.
Recently, Michigan's economy has begun to turn around. Michigan's gained over 250,000 new jobs. We've paid off $20 billion in long-term debt. And our population is increasing for the first time in a decade. But to make Michigan a top 10 state, there's still plenty of work to be done. Step up and help put Michigan on top. Learn what you can do at MichiganTurnaroundPlan.com.
Funding is also provided by Delta,